Here we go. Welcome everybody to the YouTube Model Builders Tuesday night live show. Once they go to YouTubeModelBuilders.com, there you can find the schedules for the Tuesday and Wednesday shows, which are at 8 o'clock Central, 9 o'clock Eastern Time. Also, the Saturday live show schedule is there, and the Thursday night and Saturday night shows are at 9 o'clock Central, 10 o'clock Eastern Time. Excuse me. While you're there, also click on the e-magazine. We got this guy, he's been with us for a little while, named JD. He's the editor-in-chief, and he's got a really good crew, and they produce a very good magazine called the E-Mag. So be sure and click on that tab and sign up for a notification when it comes out. Our new one just came out, I believe it's about 4 days ago. And it's about family and mall trains and all. It's a really good magazine this month again. A lot of interesting articles in it. And also tonight, JD has asked me to if I play his video about the e-magazine, and I told him I would. So we're gonna let y'all watch that, and then we'll come on into Bill's track planning show. And I tell you what, he's got a good show. So here's the e-mag review. Alrighty, now let's get on to our show. Here's Mr. Bill, the track planner, and he has got a good one. It's all yours now, Bill.
Yeah, don't put any pressure on me at all. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Uh, for those of you that get the e-magazine, and if you take the time to read my article in there, I did an article this month on selective compression. Well, I decided tonight to just kind of do an addendum to that, where a little more visual, a little more detailed than what I could write in basically 1,500 words. So I'm going to do a screen share here. We're going to go through some slides about selective compression there, and then at the end of it, we can do a lot of Q&A if we want. If there's any Q&A questions that pop up during the show here, Johnny will let me know if there's something that he thinks I ought to answer at that point. So we'll get started here. First, we'll see if I'm successful doing a screen share. That'll be the number one process here. Can everybody see that? I guess that's the first question. What's up, John? Okay. Very good. All right, you're going to hear me talk here for a little while, and we'll look at the screens. This is again going to be about selective compression. I'm going to talk about capturing the important details of a scene, making the scene believable. You're going to hear that word "believable" in this program tonight many times. I'm a big fan when I design my track plans for people that not only will they operate prototypically, but are the scenes believable? Is it something that could really happen? So that's a word that I picked up on a number of years ago, and I really like it when it comes to model railroads, design, and making it work. Then at the back third of the program, I'm going to have some slides on what I call an extreme example of selective compression. I had a gentleman get a hold of me that wanted to design a railroad that had a movie theme to it. And that was all fine and good until he told me that he had 100 square feet to work with. And then he gave me all of his givens and druthers, which I'll get into later. And I did design it. We got it designed. He's in the process of building it, but I don't know how I did it. It's really extreme compression. Let's start out with just talking about selective compression here. This is kind of my definition of what I think selective compression means. It's a process in model railroading in which bulky and repetitive elements of the prototype are omitted in order to capture the important details there. And I guess important details is in the eye of the beholder, but a lot of times I think people try to model too much, and I'll talk about that as we go through these slides. These are the things that we can compress on a model railroad. We can compress distance. A lot of people say you can't, but you really can. We can compress scenery. Structures are compressed all the time. Train lengths should be compressed. A lot of people don't do it, but it should be. And cities and towns can be compressed down. And obviously industries get compressed all the time in that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each one of these one by one with just a couple slides, and we'll talk about what I've got. I'll talk about what's on the slides, and just to give you some ideas of things to think about in when you're designing a layout and you have to do this compression. These are the things that we really can't compress. Bench work is a little hard to compress. You can't compress aisle widths. Bodies are all this, kind of a certain size, so we've got to live with certain size aisle widths. We can't compress that. Ceiling heights are set. We can't compress that. Entryways into the rooms, a little hard to compress those. Windows and any obstructions, we're stuck with them. We just have to work around them. So again, those are the things we cannot compress down. Okay, let's talk about distance compression first, because this is one that I really see what I consider to be a lot of mistakes made on that. I'm going to do a lot of talking tonight about modeling the modern model railroader. What I mean by that is the people that are modeling the modern era. I probably design, this is just a rough guesstimate, but I would say 75% of the layouts I design now are modern era. I don't do a lot of transition era or pre-transition era and that. So in the modern era, we're dealing with a lot of things going on. And the biggest problem is space, obviously. So what do I see happen, and especially with the people I talk to that want me to design layouts, what do I see happen and what do they do to me? First thing that the modern era modeler, a lot of them want to do is they want to try to include too much stuff. They're just trying to include as much as they can, and they have a real problem deciding what to eliminate. What can I leave out of there? And that's a real problem for a lot of them. They try to model large, if they're doing prototypes they try to model large sections of the prototype. They don't think in terms of smaller areas. And this fourth one is what I think is a big one. They want double track main lines in spaces where there's barely enough room for a single track main line. I again, go back to what I said a few seconds ago. If 65 or 75% of my layouts are modern era, you can take those layouts and I'll bet you that probably way over 50% of them, people want double track main lines. And a lot of people just don't have the space. The biggest thing that I think is the last one, they have trouble narrowing their focus on what they really want to model and that. And those are kind of the things I see with it from a distance standpoint. Now, let's use an example here. And this one's one I'm familiar with because I was born and raised in Nebraska and grew up there and had a business literally across the street from the Union Pacific headquarters in Omaha. Omaha to Cheyenne is roughly 500 miles, either by train or by car. It doesn't make a whole lot of difference there. How do you model 500 miles of double track main line? And in some areas in Nebraska, it's triple track main line there. Well, the answer is you can't model. It's physically, you cannot do it. If you own a 10,000 square foot building, thank you, that's great. That helps, but it ain't big enough. There, you're going to need a bigger one, assuming the last thing I've got on this slide is you want the layout to be believable. That's the key there. You just can't model the whole thing. So you need to narrow your focus. You need to think smaller. So, and again, we're talking about distance here. So how do we compress the Union Pacific in HO scale? Pick a small section. Pick an area 50 to 100 miles long. That's all you need to do, because you can do all the modeling you want to do in that amount of space. Preferably, at least this, and again, these are my opinions. These are the things I think work. Preferably, model a rural area there. Model rural towns, model rural industries. Use hidden staging to represent the large cities and the terminals. That I think is a big thing. You don't need to model, unless you like cities and you want to build big cities, that's fine. But a lot of people just don't have the room to do that. Use hidden staging to represent those cities and those terminals. Trains, if you do that and you're thinking about operation, suppose we had Cheyenne and Omaha as hidden staging on a fictitious layout here. We would have trains coming from Omaha going to Cheyenne, or we would have the vice versa, trains coming from Cheyenne going to Omaha there. We'd never have Omaha modeled, we'd never have Cheyenne modeled, but we could figure out something in between those two. When we've got 500 miles to work with, we ought to be able to find something we can model that's 50 to 100 miles long there. Again, I use that word believable here. If you model something in the 100-mile length range, you can build something, if you have the space, that's believable there. You don't need a concert hall to do it. Okay, scene compression. And this kind of goes along with distance compression a little bit here. That's why I put them together. This picture is the Bailey Yard in North Platte. It's the biggest yard in the world, freight yard. It covers 2,850 acres. That's not the interesting thing. The interesting thing is it's 8 miles long and 2 miles wide. Okay, HO scale, that's only 485 foot if we wanted to model Bailey Yard. Now, you'd only need a space 485 feet long to put this Bailey yard in there, you're also going to need 121-foot wide space there. There's also 315 miles of track in Bailey Yard. I figured that out using Atlas Flex Track, and I think it came out to over 6,000 pieces of Flex Track there if you want to model it. And by the way, Bailey gets 125 trains a day running through the thing. Obviously, this can't be modeled. I don't even think this could be modeled compressed state. I don't think there's any way to do this and make it believable. I'm not smart enough to figure that out. Okay, here's what I suggest. Here's what I would do. If you want to compress a scene, use things that work. Small yards are much easier and I think much more interesting, and they can be totally believable when you model them. This yard here that I've got a picture of, if you just if we studied it for a little bit, and I'll blow the picture up just a little bit here. The track work isn't that great. The ground, the trot ties. Well, that's all interesting things that you can model into the scene. You go back to Bailey Yard. There's probably not a weed in that 8 miles anywhere. There, just track and ground. Also, small yards, and especially one like this one I've got in the picture here, it's a perfect size for a model railroad. And you still have all the operations that you want on it. You can still do all the things you want to do. And again, there's that word again. This would be believable. This would look like it should be on the layout there. Okay. Structure compression. Many prototype industries, are not modelable. And I don't even know if modelable is a word. I just put it on there. The structure you see in the picture here, I assume to most of you, it looks pretty familiar. The compressed version of this is probably on not hundreds of layouts. This is probably on thousands of layouts across the country. It's the Del Monte packing plant in Santa Ana, California. Whose kit represents this building? Now, to talk about this just for a second, the loading dock is here, and if I counted correctly, I think you can put 6 boxcars along that loading dock to load from in that. Well, most of you have already guessed this. This is no big deal, but there's the building. This building from Walthers was modeled after the one there. But Walthers understood there was no way they could do the prototype and have it fit anybody's layout. So they took this, they built this, they knew it would fit on a lot of layouts. And I think on this one here, you can park, I think, 2 boxcars on this one to load and that. So they took it and they made it basically about 20% the size of the real thing there. But that's a really good example of taking a real industry and selectively compressing it down so that it'll work on a model railroad. Train links. This is an area where I kind of have an issue with a lot of people about how long trains should be. I got this picture of this Union Pacific train running over this bridge here, and just to show you how long the doggone train is and that. We'll go back to the modern era modeler. The modern era modeler has grown up watching 100+ car trains, consists. That's what they know. That's what they see. That's what they grew up with. That's what they want. That's there. I'm 71 years old. I kind of like the 1950s and 60s. Most of these people that are modeling model era, they weren't even born in the 60s there. So that's ancient history to them there. Train lengths should be determined by the size of the layout, not layout era. And that may sound kind of contradictory, but I truly believe that. Want your layout to look like a toy train layout? Run long consists on it. Run trains that are way too long for the layout there. Do you want to make it look believable? Run short consists. Now, I'll give you the best example I can give you of this is the layout that I operate on once in a while that is 2,700 2,700 feet in a basement. The layout takes up 2,700 square foot of a basement. The average train on that layout is 20 cars. Once in a while, it might get to 25, but very seldom. Most of the time, it's anywhere from 18 to 21 cars. And we're talking about a modern era layout that has a long main line, and he's maxing it out at 20 to 21 cars. How does it look? It looks totally, in my mind, prototypical. It looks like it should look there. And the other advantage to it is, if you want to go, you could run a 40-car train on this layout, but the problem is you need two people to operate, because somebody's got to be watching the back end of it while somebody's running the front end when they get that long there. But and again, I don't think it looks believable there. One of the ways you can do this, if you've got an arrival departure tracks on your layout, how about that?
Yeah, we got you back. Sorry about that, folks. We just had a little technical difficulty, but hopefully we've corrected.
Okay, we'll bring this back up.
Yeah.
Can we see it now, Johnny?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Determining train lengths. If you have arrival and departure tracks on your layout, that can determine your train lengths. Whatever length those arrival and departure tracks are, that's what your trains should fit on your arrival and departure tracks. They shouldn't be longer than those tracks. If one of this is my pet peeve about layouts and things that I think look toy-like. If the engine on your train is arriving in one town and the caboose hasn't left the previous town, you've got too long a consist. You got way too long a consist on that. These suggestions I put on here are just my suggestions. This is nothing written in stone. If you've got a layout that's in a space that's 150 to 200 square foot, personally, I think 10 to 12 car trains should be the max. Go up to 200 to 300 square foot, yeah, you can probably jump up to 15 to 18 car trains. And if you've got 300 or more foot, yeah, you can do 22 cars. I sure wouldn't be going up to 25, 30, 40 cars. I just don't think it looks prototypical or looks good. There. Okay. City and town compression. There. And this one's kind of a tough one for people if they like to model towns. Large cities on small layouts, in my opinion, are bad ideas. Having a large city scene on a small layout completely overpowers the layout. It just doesn't go together there. Again, in my opinion, you put tall multi-story structures on these small layouts, I don't think it looks believable. It just looks kind of funny to me. Another thing that some people don't even think about, I do when I design because it comes up all the time. If you do prototypical street and sidewalk widths, it really eats up a lot of real estate on a layout. And if you've got a small layout, between buildings and streets, you're going to take up a lot of real estate. So how do we eliminate this, or how do we selectively compress this? The 2,700 foot layout that I told you about is running, basically 20 car trains. He has on that layout a huge city scene. And I mean, it is big. The only thing about it is it's all photo backdrops and building flats. It runs for probably 20 feet or more, but it only sticks out from the wall about a half inch, maybe at the most 3/4 of an inch. But it looks great and it looks perfect there. But it's all photo backdrops and building flats on it. I think it's a great idea. I think it's the way to go is to model multiple small rural towns. We go back to the UP going across Nebraska scenario that I put up there. You forget about Omaha, you forget about Cheyenne, just model something in between. And believe me, in Nebraska, you got a whole bunch of small rural towns you can work with. And a lot of them have some, I think they have a lot of interesting things going on. Plus, it's very simple. You can take, like this picture shows here, you only need maybe 3, 4, 5 buildings, maybe a half a dozen at the most, to make a believable rural town scene. You don't have to have a lot of buildings to do it there. Hiding the large cities, I want to go back because I want to emphasize this when we talk about this. If you use hidden staging to represent the large cities, this gives your trains somewhere to go and somewhere to come from. This is, again, talking about prototypical operations, making the layout believable. So, again, smaller the towns, the better I like it. You'll see me model or design very few towns that take up any more than maybe 3 or 4 square foot on a layout. I just don't do it. Industry compression. Okay. Selective compression is absolutely a must when we talk about industries. As far as I'm concerned, there are very few industries that can be modeled one-to-one in HO. There. And when I say an industry, I'm not talking about a little team track someplace. Obviously, that can be modeled, but I'm talking about an industry where there may be 3 or 4 tracks coming into it or something like that. Most of the time today, especially in this modern era, most of the industries are big and they take a lot of tracks, and it makes the task very hard to model them. The challenge is always compressing the industries and still making them, again, the word believable, so that it looks believable. I've used this next example, numerous times in my other presentations, but I think it's well worth talking about. On my previous layout, prairie layout, a Camas Prairie Railroad up in Idaho. There, and I basically modeled from Lewiston, Idaho to Grangeville, Idaho, and the era was the mid-'80s. There, in Lewiston, or just outside of Lewiston, they had the Potlatch paper mill, and it was huge. It took up hundreds of acres of property there. Modeling the Camas Prairie, I really did want to model the paper mill, but my layout that I had this on was 25 by 25, but that wasn't even close to being big enough to try and do a lot of these buildings on and that. So I had to figure out, how do I model this industry this big and put it on an HO layout? Okay. Here's a slide, the aerial view of the same that you just, a little more modern, a little bit newer. And I like this photograph because it gives you the names of each one of the buildings that made up the Potlatch paper mill and what the buildings were. I think I counted there 20 possibilities here of buildings you could use. There's 20 different types of buildings you could put on the layout. I settled for 3 things to put on the layout. One was the paperboard plant, which was a pretty good sized plant, but as you'll see how I selectively compressed it here in a minute. The Clearwater tissue mill, which is the number 2 one that's circled up. I put that one in only because what they did there is they manufactured toilet paper. So I thought I had to have a toilet paper plant on this layout, on that layout. So probably the only reason I chose it. And then because I wanted wood chip cars to come into there, my other choice was to put a wood chip pile. There were chip cars to get on from. Well, the problem with all this was I had a space that was 2 foot long. That's what I had to work with. So if you talk about selective compression, this is it. This is what I did. The building that you see marked on the picture, number 1, that was the paperboard plant. I reduced that by at least 80% from what the prototype is. Probably, maybe 80% isn't enough. Maybe it was more than that. The clear water tissue, which is down in the left-hand corner, is reduced probably by at least 60% from what the original building was. And the wood chip pile, compared to what the wood chip pile was in the other one, is reduced by at least 90%. The interesting scene on the layout was we could still switch in and out of here 10 to 15 cars. I think it was 10 to 13 cars could get switched in and out of here. This was one of the most popular jobs on this layout when I held op sessions, because it was the most challenging one, because an operator had to bring in 10, 12 cars and had to pick up sometimes 10 or 12 cars. What you don't see back here in this upper area here was the shipping area. There was 2 or 3 more box cars inside that building there. And then there was all these other tracks that were affiliated with it. So you could easily put 10 or 12 cars in here and then bring in 10 or 12 cars. Then you had to figure out in this little 2 by 10 foot space how to get all these cars switched around and that. And I had an experienced operator running this job on that layout. Would still take him roughly about 40 minutes real time. I had an inexperienced operator said he wanted to do it one time. He worked at it for over 2 hours and never got it completed. Never finished the job there. Okay. Johnny, do we have any questions that I should answer before I go into this layout that I designed?
Not really.
Okay, that's fine. All right. So I just thought if somebody had a question, this would be a good time to do it. What I'm going to do here now is I'm going to take you through just a quick series of slides here on this, what I consider to be just an extreme compression example. And this is one that I actually did build. This is one that it's done, finished. The gentleman is actually building it. Here's the space we had to work with. And I'll even blow this up a little bigger so it'll be easier for people to see. Okay, we had 10.5 foot by 7, or excuse me, by 9.5, 9'7". If you kind of figure those out, I think that figures out almost to exactly 100 square foot room there, with a door in the middle of one wall, naturally. So he wanted to do HO scale. He wanted it to be kind of a walk along or walk around design there. And this is what I had to work with. So what did we do? Well, first, let's talk about this gentleman's Gibbons and Druthers, because this is the interesting thing about this layout. He wanted to lay out, because he had this diorama of the Bates Motel and Mansion that was on the diorama was 36 inches long by 24 inches wide, and he had already had it built. It was all scratch built. It was gorgeous. Did just an incredible job building it. Looked exactly like what you would see at the Bates Motel and the Mansion sitting up on the hill behind it. That was going to be one of the center points of this layout that he wanted. Well, just for a second here, take a second to think about it. I got 9'7" one way and I got 10'5" another way, and he gives me a diorama that's 36 by 24. That alone's eaten up about 20% of the space I've got, not counting aisle space there. Then he comes along at a later date and he says, oh, by the way, I've got a custom built trestle that I built that's 24 inches long, 15 inches deep, high. I want it included on this layout too. And I says, please, please don't tell me it's curved. And he says, no, it's straight. I says, thank God. Here's his what he wants on this layout. He wanted a motion picture theme to it. He wanted to use the 2 dioramas. He had the Bates Motel and Mansion and the custom built trestle. He wanted it multi-level with a helix. Again, 100 square foot, he wants multi-level with a helix on it. He wanted a wharf scene. He wanted a city scene. He wanted a drive-in movie scene on it. He wanted numerous industry spurs to switch cars at. He wanted continuous running levels. He wanted sorting yards on both levels. And then he hits me up at the very end and he says, I'd like to put in a trolley interurban system on it. Well, as I'm reading this from his emails, I'm thinking there is no way I can design a layout for him. Well, I didn't give up. I worked on it, and I'm going to take you through a series of slides here that shows you what we finally ended up with. This is the basic aisle and bench work design. There, the blue line that you see running around there is the fascia of the bench work. The light green is the bench work. The light blue line, straight line running through the center, that's just simply a view block on both levels of the peninsula. And the numbers on the aisles are the inches that the aisle is wide. Now, we've got two, what I consider to be fairly severe pinch points on this layout. We have one right at the end of the peninsula, which is 20.5 inches. We have another one, which is up at the top there, which is 21.5 inches. Because of the radiuses I had to work with and the things that he wanted on this layout, he had to put up with these measurements. He actually, I think if I remember right, I had him lay this out on the floor so that he had this kind of aisle width, and then I had him walk through it. And he came back to me and says, not going to be a problem at all. There, well, I can guarantee you this guy is not my size there, because I would have a problem with this. But he says, nope, it'll work fine for me, he said. So this is your basic bench work that I designed for the layout. Okay, here's the lower level track plan. The black tracks, which on this level, they're all black, were mainline, yards, industry, spurs. There. There's no reverse loop on this lower level. I do have one on the upper level, which you'll see in a minute here, and that. But there is continuous running. You can see where the helix is sitting here and the track that runs behind the helix, which allows continuous running on this layout. There. To give you the numbers on the helix, it's the tightest helix I've ever designed. It's got a 22-inch radius. The starting height on it is at the bottom is 35 inches. It goes up to 56 inches up on the upper level. There's 6 turns in it. We've got a 2.5% grade on it. And we've got a spacing of 3.5 inches between the turns. Now that's about as small as you ever want to go in distance between levels there. But he's running mostly transition era, nothing big, nothing large, and that. And he's assured me that 3.5 inches would work fine for him. So this is the track work for the lower level, or maybe what you could call main level. If you notice up in the right-hand corner, there's even a turntable. I got a turntable into this thing too for him. There. Okay, let's look at the upper level now. And this here, I'll back this out a little bit. We had a yard in the other one up at the top. We got a yard in this one here. We've got the same helixes here. The purple track that you see here is the trolley interurban. And what he plans on doing with this is he's got an interurban car where he's going to put the track work. The city is where you see this purple. You'll see this when I show you the finished product here in a little bit. The city scene is there, so he's got the trolley line running down the middle of the city street, and then it goes out, connects into the to the track, and then we've got 2 or 3 small passenger depots on this layout that the interurban can run to, and that. So, pretty ingenious ideas he had. I really have to give him credit. The red line you see is the reverse loop, and I had to put that in there so that the trains could get back down the helix, because once they came up the helix, they were basically going in a clockwise direction, and to get back down the helix, I didn't want to put in another connector to it because it was just going to be difficult to do. So I threw the helix in. He can run through the reverse loop. Excuse me, I put the reverse loop in. I'm sorry. And he can run the train around, and now the train can go in a counterclockwise direction and get back down the helix to the main level there. It's a lot of track, a lot of things to do with this layout, a lot of operations here. Okay, now here's the lower level. We'll go back to the lower level, and this is the finished product here, there on the lower level. Obviously, up here in the upper left-hand wharf scene that he wanted, there's a small yard right above it. We've got the turntable over on the right. There, we've got industries. Now, most of these industries that are on this layout he picked out, and they're almost all Craftsman quality buildings. They're all they're very expensive. Some of them are fine scale miniatures, some are micro scale, but they're all high-end, high-quality buildings. And he says the ones he can't find, he's going to actually just scratch build himself. His idea on this layout, being this movie set theme, was these buildings are going to be places where things got built there. Some of these buildings that actually have different meanings from the manufacturer. One of them is going to be the wardrobe department, where they do all the wardrobe stuff. Another one was going to be the carpenter building, where they build all the carpentry stuff for the movies and that. He had this complete plan there. But on this level alone, right here, if you can see the cursor there, and down in this corner are 3 small passenger stations that he can run that interurban train from the main city, which you'll see in a minute here, down to these small little passenger depots that I've got around there. But this is the completed scene on the lower level. Here's the upper level. This is the one that I think is probably the most interesting one there. Up here in the left-hand side above the Views Motel and the mansion. And that's that diorama that I told you was 2 foot wide by 3 foot long. How did I get it in there? I set it up even about 4 inches higher off of the benchwork, and the train runs underneath of it. That was the only way to do this and make it work there. But we decided that would look pretty neat that way, because that raised the base motel to almost eye level. It raised the mansion up, so you were looking up the hill at the mansion, and he thought that would be a great scene when it gets finished there. The one that I kind of like is this one right here that we put over the helix. This is Walther's. This is the only kind of cheap kit on the layout practically. This is Walther's drive-in movie theater that he had. And this is going to be built as a diorama. This is going to be built like the Bates Motel was. And he's going to drop this on top of the helix. This is going to sit. So what happens when you walk in the room here, on the lower level, you'll just see a view block. You won't see the helix. But what you'll see at just a little below eye level is this drive-in movie theater that he's going to put in. And what he's going to do, he's going to use the one with Walther's where you can put an iPad or tablet in this movie thing. And he's going to, when people come to visit, he's going to play Psycho on the drive-in movie theater thing there, which I thought was appropriate because he's got the Bates Motel up there. But you see the city scene sitting next to the drive-in movie theater there. In the city, and this is not a big deal, but it was very important to him, I included 3 movie theaters in that city scene because he wanted movie theaters in there. He wants to do lighting and all that kind of stuff there. Then the other buildings you see up in the upper right-hand corner, that's an engine facility to service the engines on the layout. And then there's that small switching yard up there. And then down in the corner down here is a fine-scale miniature building that's going to be one of his movie buildings that builds something in there. But again, keep in mind, this has all been done inside of 100 square foot space. And Johnny, I think I'm done. I think I've done what I'm supposed to do here. So.
All right. I'm trying to get the microphone.
I can leave this picture up, or I can go back to, a picture of me. What would you rather do?
Let's leave this one up for a second.
Okay.
All right, let's see. I got Split Rock 323. At what point do you tell a friend, client, that you can't have everything you want on their layout?
Probably about 3 minutes into our conversation. The one thing that you have to, I was in business for 40 years. I owned my own business, and it was a business where honesty was was the key to being successful. And I was taught by my father that be straight with them up front. Don't stroke them. Don't give them false hope. So I tell them right up, you can't do this. You really can't. This is one. Just a little side note about this layout here. I really didn't want to do this one there. And so I kind of, the way I thought about it is I told him, I says, why don't you send me some pictures of that Bates Motel in the mansion? Let me take a look at it and see if I think it'll work or it won't work. He says, I'll be happy to do that for you. So he sent them to me. And of course, I took the wrong attitude. I kind of thought, well, this will come in. It'll look kind of crappy. It won't look very good. Maybe I can use some kind of excuse about that. The pictures he sent me of that thing, and that's all scratch built. He scratch built that whole thing himself. It is absolutely gorgeous. It is so neat. What I've depicted here is just kind of how it sits. If you've seen the pictures, it's just a gorgeous thing he built. Well, as soon as I seen that, I knew I was trapped, because if he could build that, he could probably build about whatever I was going to design. And so this layout actually took about almost 2.5 months to build. It's even as small as it is, because I had to keep going back to him saying, do you think this will work? Is this going to be okay? Is this kind of what you want? And that. So the smaller the layout, sometimes the longer it takes to design them.
Yeah. I've got a question.
Okay.
Yeah, we talk about compression, but what about perspective? Doesn't that kind of go hand in hand with compression?
It does. What I do, I don't do on these plans, but I tell my clients, and what I did on my own layout there, and I learned this from people that are way, way smarter than me, is to get forced perspective, and this is no big, everybody kind of knows this if they modeled for any period of time. I made a lot of trees and a lot of buildings that were only maybe 1.5 feet back or 2 foot or so off the front edge of the layout. I did them in N scale, did the trees in N scale. And that forced the perspective that there was a lot more distance than there was there. So that's just an old trick that's been used many, many times. Forced perspective, it's called. This what I was talking about tonight, Johnny, was a case of trying to get people to understand that they see the big picture. The big picture helps you design your layout, but then kind of start thinking smaller. Thinking of like I had in that one slide. Can't do UP from Omaha to Cheyenne, but we can sure pick out 50 or 100 miles someplace to model and make it work.
Yeah. Gino's, I like his layout when he did that street running.
Absolutely. Well, and look, Gino's layout's not that big. It's basically a shelf layout, but because of the detail he has, it looks great. This hobby to me now, I've been in it for almost 40 years. What's available to the modeler today compared to what was available back when I was 20 years old or 30 years old, it's just incredible.
Yeah. BNSF Buff says, looks like a nice plan for anything he wants in a layout. Of course, you just answered Phil Wyman's question. He was saying, Bill, thoughts on using N-scale buildings to show distance on an HO layout.
Right. They have to go in the background. They obviously have to be, in the back scenes there. You'll see on this layout here, this picture that's up on the screen, up in the upper left and upper right-hand corners, I had open areas there. And the reason we did, especially on the left-hand side, was that was just way too far of a reach to do anything back in there. Even if he was standing on a little step stool, that was going to be a long reach.
Yeah.
And designed open areas back there with a view block. Down in the lower right-hand corner wasn't going to be quite as much of a reach, so it wasn't going to be a problem. And then keep in mind on that drive-in movie theater, that's a module that's going to sit on top of the helix there. He'll build that on his workbench, and then he'll just take and drop it in on there, which I think is a pretty ingenious idea.
Yeah, let me guess, you got that one from Lloyd, MHO Junction.
Well,
fell out there in Canada, building a big brewery on top of his helix.
That's a real. Yeah. Well, of course, I designed that layout for Lloyd, and then he called me up and says, "I want to put a brewery on top of the helix." And I says, "You want to do what?"
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, he did it. It looks great. I can't argue with him at all. So I went ahead and I designed. Then I went ahead and designed for Lloyd that brewery to fit up on top of there. We had to reconfigure some track to be able to get up to it, and because I had never planned on anything being on top of it at all.
Yeah.
But we got it done. It worked out.
All right, now on this track plan here, both lower level and upper level, you have yards in there. Do you generally try to stay with stub in yards, and is there a particular number of tracks you would prefer to have in a yard, like just 2 or 3? Or I know room is a big issue.
That's right. The thing with this layout here is we were so restricted for space. Stub in yards was our only choice. That was the only choice I had to work with, because we didn't have enough area. I could have put in double-ended yard, but the yard tracks would have been 2 cars long, and you just didn't want that. I wasn't even sure that I was able to get in. This over here on the right, running around the engine facility here. That inside track is the yard lead.
Yeah, that's
a person working this yard would use to switch cars in and out of that yard and not follow the main line. I got an email from a gentleman that I respect. He's building a hell of a nice layout and he's really into operations, but he sent me an email and he says, "I don't totally understand yard leads. Would you give me some information on it?" So I said, "Sure. When you design a yard lead, you want the yard lead to be at the very, very, very minimum the same length as your longest yard track. That's the minimum. What's the best thing? You want the yard lead to be at least 125% longer than your longest yard track. And it would be better if the yard lead was 150% longer than your longest lead." Why? When a operator is switching out a yard, the last thing he wants to worry about is he going to run his engine off the end of the yard lead? So if the yard lead's long enough, he'll never have a train that's so long that he'll get into a problem with it. This layout here has a yard lead on it, but there was no way I could build it into those kind of specs because we just did not have the space.
Yeah, but right there too, it comes right back into the main, so he's actually got a runaround for the engine that's not all that long, so he can hit the main, scoot around, get back in the yard again real quick.
And the other, this track right here, this little one in the middle that you see right here, that can be used multiple ways. That can be a runaround track right there, or that could be used depending on what era he's running here. If he's going to have cabooses, that could be a caboose track.
Yeah.
If it wanted to be there. What makes this yard work, and this is something I think is kind of important to tell people, because this is something I think a lot of people when they design miss out on. Right up here where I've got the little hand, if you can see it, sitting right there, that is sitting over the top of a double slip turnout there. Now they ain't cheap to buy, but they save you about 12 to 18 inches of space. And on this particular design, that was critical to make this yard work, was putting right here this double slip turnout in there, switch in there, because now that you can get into the yard, you can get out of the yard, you can do just about anything you want to do running through that double slip. If I wouldn't have been able to put that in there, the yard wouldn't have been able to be designed the way you see it here.
Yeah.
And would I like to have double-ended yards? Yeah, I'd love to design double-ended yards, but it wasn't going to happen on this layout. Let's talk here, John, just for a little bit about I've got a yard on the first level and I've got a yard on the other. This is the upper level and lower level. Those yards are put in there because he does want to operate this layout somewhat prototypically. Even though this is a kind of a displayed layout, he'd like to operate it prototypically. So our theory is these yards are where trains coming from the lower level up to the upper level don't go to the industries with the cars they've got. They bring them over to this yard, drop them off. The engine gets serviced. And then what happens is the yard master, after the engine's been serviced, the yard master gives that engineer a set of cars that go back down to the lower level. They go into a yard that's on the lower level, and then the trains that service these industries on this layout, there really isn't that many industries. There's many more on the lower level than there is on the upper level. The trains that service those come out of this yard. They work out of this yard here. You don't take something out of a industry on this level and run it directly to an industry on the other level. It all has to go through the yards. Why do we do that? Because it's a little more prototypical and it creates time and distance, which I've talked about numerous times. Yeah. There. I'm going to go back to that previous slide of the lower level, because that one has got a lot more industries to be switched out. If you look at that, there's many more industrial switching areas on this one here. And actually the yard, basically the same size, even though it's only 2 tracks, but the tracks are longer in this area.
Yeah.
Oh.
Do have a comment is the slide that's the upper level, BNSF.
I'll go back to it here. Okay.
Yeah, BNSF. Yeah, he's. Why not move the drive-in scene all the way back to the wall and make the parking lot an access hatch from within the helix?
Could have been done. That's a possibility. What you see here is this blue line here is a view block, and what he's going to do with that view block is going to go up, probably not ceiling height, but it's going to go up high enough so that nobody could ever see over it. So if you walked into this room, you turn left, you look at this drive-in movie scene, your first thought is that's where the room ends, is right along that view block right there.
Yeah.
On it. And what I suggested to him that he do, especially because of the compactness of this layout and how small it is, I told him, if you want to make this look 25 or 30% larger than what it really is, put photo backdrops on these view blocks. Add photo backdrops to them, and it'll just be amazed at how much larger it'll make the layout look. But yeah, it was just a case of not wanting this to have all the way back and have it, because first of all, when he was running the Psycho movie in that thing, it would have been hard for him to probably reach it and get to it without getting into an access hatch. And the access hatch would have meant getting into getting underneath the layout, climbing up through the helix. One of the things I think people forget, I'm going to go back a couple slides here, Johnny.
All right.
Let's go back to this one. See how much space the helix takes up? Again, remember, once he wanted a helix, but he also wanted continuous running. So I knew I was going to have to run track behind the helix. That shifted that helix at least 6 to 7 inches forward, which then cramped us real tough right in here.
Yeah.
If I wouldn't have had continuous running, I could have shoved that helix all the way back to the wall. Then maybe we could have done what BFN is suggesting. Very, very possible to do that. But again, remember, this is only a 22-inch helix. So this thing is only basically 4 inches outside edge of the bench work to the outside edge of the bench work. But for this room, that's a big thing.
Yeah. Yeah, you're taking up almost 4 feet right there.
That's right.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
Uh,
that's why when he first came to one of this, I didn't know if I could do it.
all right. Al Marr Jr. wanted to. Is there a consulting fee if somebody would like to do a layout?
What I'm happy to do with anybody is if they want to send me a track plan that they've come up with, at no charge, I will be happy to critique it for them. And I will tell them, you know, the good points and the bad points based on how I design there. If they want me to design something, that's a different story. But I'll give you probably the best example on it is the one for the gentleman that has the Colorado joint line, Kevin Smith. When Kevin decided to improve his layout, and he's going to kind of redo that whole thing, Kevin got a hold of me and we talked a little bit, and he had these ideas, and I came back at him, and one thing led to another, and Kevin and I spent probably 2 to 3 weeks talking about what he was doing. And what you see now in that last video was mostly Kevin's ideas. All I did is kind of tweak it a little bit and say, here, Kevin, why don't you do this? Why don't you move this, move that? I think this would work out better if you did this. And I did that for Kevin. I did not charge Kevin anything for it, and he was very appreciative of it. He thanked me, and he even put if you guys watched the video, he was very kind, and he threw my website up for about, I don't know, 10, 15 seconds on his video, which I thought was very, very nice of him.
Yeah, yeah. BNSF buff also would also suggest curving the backdrops in the corners rather than having 90-degree corners to create a longer distance.
Right. That would have looked fine. And the thing with that is, I'll be honest with you, that was probably laziness on my part, because by the time I got to doing that, I'm going, boy, this is getting to be a lot of work. But he's exactly right. If we would have if it occurred to me, it'll look better. And I always tell everybody, if anybody ever builds a layout exactly the way I designed it, I really screwed up. I did something wrong in that, because there's many things that I don't think about, that when the builder starts building it, he goes, hey, I think this will be a better idea, and then he'll come out, I'll go, yeah, you're exactly right, that's going to be a way better way to do things. So all I'm trying to do with these track plans for people is push them in a direction of where they kind of want to go, and just help them along. Get them thinking about operations, get them thinking about, is this thing going to work? Is it going to run? Interesting thing about the 2,700 square foot layout. Now, everybody would think, my God, you can do anything you want to do. There was a lot of limitations on that layout. There's a lot of things that had to be left out of it. But one of the things that I think is so neat about it, most of the bench work, and I mean, when I say most of it, I'm talking probably 80% of the bench work on this 2,700 square foot layout is under 30 inches wide.
Yeah.
And that's something people don't think about. They think, oh, I got all this room, I can build this big bench work. You don't want big bench work. That's something you don't want.
Yeah, John was finding that out on his first layout. He and his dad built the bench work.
Sure.
And being the attic room where the wall's only 4 feet tall, and then the ceiling starts and angles at the same angle as the roof. Yeah, I was having a problem just climbing up on the layout to get in that back corner.
The average individual, the average 6 foot tall person, the maximum reach they can go that's even begins to be somewhat comfortable is about 34 to 36 inches. If you're 6'5", you can probably get by with 36 inches. But if you're, 5'10" or 5'11", anything beyond 36 inches is really hard to work with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, the other problem you have with a lot of the people that are new to the hobby, I go through this all the time. They really don't understand how much railroad you can put on a 12 or 18 inch or 20 inch shelf. You can do a lot with that. They think they've got to have 36 inches, 40-inch shelves. Not even close.
Well, I'll tell you what, John, you designed his yard to be 18 inches wide, and you got 5 main tracks on that thing. That's still interesting. Yeah, it's going to work out just fine.
Well, like I wrote in the article in the magazine, or in the e-mag, the big layout, the 2,700 square foot layout, has got intermodal operations on it there. The interesting thing is, I think there's only 2 tracks into the intermodal. I don't think there's 3. I think there's only 2. And that was because of a space issue. Here we got 2,700 square foot. He wants to put an intermodal yard in, and he's got space problems with it. So what he did is he put it on the front of the layout, at the fascia edge of the layout. The scene is only about a foot, maybe 15 inches, 18 inches deep at the most there. But he's designed it in such a way that it gives the perspective that this intermodal yard continues off the front of the layout there. And it's a really neat way to do it there. And when you're operating on the railroad and you're operating this intermodal yard, you don't even think about the fact that it's probably only about half as big as what a normal intermodal yard should be.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Well,
have I totally bored everybody tonight?
Nah.
Sometimes.
Nah. No, they wasn't any real lot of questions. BNSF buff. Yeah, he's one that's come up with some good comments here. AJ, being the smart aleck he is, somebody made the comment, how many wood chips does it take to make a roll of toilet paper? So he answered that.
Yeah, I don't know. That's beyond my pay scale.
Yeah. Yeah, we usually leave those questions for AJ. Yeah.
There you go.
Let him answer those.
Well, I wanted to talk about selective compression because I think it's something that people should try to learn about.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay.
I got a storm. I got a storm that just come in, and let me see here if I can find the my YouTube page. Got lost it. Let me get back over here. Get back on YouTube again real quick.
Okay.
So hopefully everybody's being patient with me here and seeing what I'm doing because it's all on the streaming. Let's get that page off of there so it won't be in the video for too long.
Yep.
Alrighty. Do you want better?
I just want that picture of me. If that makes any difference.
Yeah. Okay, I got everything back up and going here again. I tell you what, this storm sounds like it's getting pretty bad. So, since I lost my internet, it's just a matter of time I may be losing it again.
Okay.
So.
Well, I'm done, and I'll be happy to answer.
There you can check schedules for the Tuesday, Wednesday shows, which are at 8 o'clock Central, 9 o'clock Eastern time. Thursday and the Saturday live show is 9 o'clock Central, 10 o'clock Eastern. You can also check the schedule on the website for the live show, Saturday live show. We just had one last Saturday. Steve Montgomery. That was a good one on the time saver. And also be sure to click on the eMag and sign up for eMag notifications. JD and his team do a great job on that. So with that said, hope everybody has a good weekend. Only show left is the Thursday show for this month. Then we'll be into June. So, all right, everyone, have a good night, and we shall see you on Thursday at 10 o'clock Eastern Time, 9 o'clock Central. Everyone, have a good night.